Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So, hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to AP English Literature's Preview Night 1. My name's Alana, and I'm a freshman at UCLA, and I am one of 6 amazing student hosts who are going to be guiding and supporting you throughout this Cram season. So, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Next slide, please. So tonight we're going to go ahead and take a brief look into prose analysis. And I say brief because we are going to have our 3-hour Cram review sessions next week, where we are going to be going into way more detail on this content. So the purpose of tonight is to give you a sort of baseline understanding of prose analysis, and to also give you an idea of the type of material and content we are going to be covering in our Cram sessions. So sort of a 2-in-1 there. And so before we go ahead and get started with any sort of content, we want to go ahead and establish a few community agreements to make sure that this is a learning and fun experience for everyone. So the first thing I want to emphasize is let's make sure we're being supportive. So as I said, this is a learning environment. And honestly, half the battle of learning is making mistakes. So we want to make sure we're giving each other the grace to do that. And we also want to make sure that we're being patient. So we have 5 whole nights together, and this is a virtual environment, which honestly is a beast in and of itself. So if and when any technical difficulties arise, please just be patient with us as we navigate that. And lastly, but most importantly, we want to make sure we're being kind. So we are all real people with very real feelings, especially us student hosts. So we want to make sure that we're using kind language, we're being respectful when we're using our chat. And we also encourage you to call us out on our mistakes. We are not infallible at all. We encourage you to be respectful. Just put it in the Q&A. Did you mean to say that? Can you clarify this? We encourage you to do that. And as long as we're following these 3 things, this should be a great experience for everyone. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, so what do we do with this information, right? How can we take advantage of a preview session? So we want to encourage you to take notes. You might hear me flipping. I have my notebook here to keep myself organized, and we encourage you to take notes to keep yourself engaged. But with that, we don't want you to write everything down, okay? That is not the purpose at all. And the reason I say that is because these slides and also the recording of the session are going to be available for you on your Fiveable account under My Stuff. So if you do want to go back and check a detail, you'll be able to do so. So don't worry about writing everything down. And I also want to direct your attention to our chat function. So our chat function is where the majority of participation is going to happen. So when we pose questions to you, this is where you're going to answer them. This is also where you can engage with your peers. You can share tips and tricks. But the one thing is, if you do have any specific questions for us, we want you to direct those to the Q&A tab. And the reason for that is that things have a tendency to get lost in the chat with the whole hustle and bustle of it. So by using the Q&A tab, that will make sure that we're able to address all of your questions without anything getting lost in the mix. And for our 3-hour Cram sessions next week, we will be taking breaks. No one wants to hear us yap for 3 hours straight, so don't worry. But since tonight is a shorter session, we're not going to have to worry about that. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a preview of our schedule for next week, broken down by subject. So take a picture, make a note of this, however is best for you, because we have a whole bunch of information to give to you, and we want to make sure you're taking advantage of it. So try your best to attend those. And like I said, I am one of 6 amazing student hosts, as well as our fearless leader, our teacher host, Erica, and all of which you'll be meeting as our Cram sessions go on. Okay, so tonight's agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to start with our basics of literary analysis, move into some story structure, theme and message, a bit of prose MCQ practice, and a Q&A at the end for any last questions you may have for us. But I do want to say with that, though, you certainly don't have to hold on to your questions and wait for the Q&A. If you have any questions for us throughout the session, you are able to put those into the Q&A, and we'll address them as we get them. So you don't have to hold on to them. And we encourage you to follow us on our social media. Our social media team is constantly posting updates. So by following our accounts, that's the best way to ensure you're staying up to date on everything that Fiveable has to offer you, which is a whole lot. So go do that. Our Cram sessions are only accessible via Cram mode. So great question, and thank you for asking, and great timing as well. So by unlocking Cram mode, you'll be able to access not only our Cram sessions for AP Lit, but all the Cram sessions for all the AP subjects. And Cram mode also offers study guides for all the AP subjects, for the SAT, ACT, and over 200,000 practice questions, which, if you know, practice questions are very difficult to come by on the internet. So all in all, this is a fantastic deal. It's $10 a month or $40 for the year. So be sure to unlock Cram mode after this session in order to have access to our Cram sessions next week. So finally getting into content. So what is literary analysis, right? I bet you've heard it thrown around a whole lot in your classrooms. So let's just go ahead and quantify it once and for all. So literary analysis is essentially the process of examining a work for its methods, structure, and techniques in order to get to the bottom of what is the author really trying to tell us. And I want to emphasize that literary analysis is not cherry picking a detail, taking it out of its context and saying, here, this is what the text means. Not at all. What we want to do is zone in on those details and see and put it into its context, right? We want to put it into the context of theme, of history, of social and political context. So the curtains are not just blue. There's always more going on beneath the surface that we want to unlock. And so in so doing literary analysis, this is what's going to help us appreciate what the author is trying to tell us, right? And it's also going to help us build up our evidence base to build our claims, right? And our claims are going to be the crux of those literary argument essays that we're going to be writing for the AP exam. But that's beyond what we're going to talk about today, so certainly don't worry about it. We're just focusing on the basics for now. All right, so moving on, now the question becomes, well, I know what literary analysis is, but what am I looking for? What do I analyze, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and walk you through all of these elements using an example I'm hoping everyone's familiar with, Harry Potter. But if you aren't familiar with it, what are you doing? Go watch it or read it after this. But let's go ahead and get started. So starting with plot. Plot is going to consist of our major events, right? Things that are defining the text. But with this, I want to make a note that when we say major events, we're not discounting the minor events. They still matter. We're focusing on the major events because these are the things that are going to orient the text in our mind and allow us to make general conclusions about what's happening. So if we take Harry Potter, right? We have the death of Harry's parents. We have the death of Harry's parents, which are going to, well, any death in Harry Potter, honestly, right? Because then that's how Harry gets placed with, I don't remember their names, Petunia, right? And his abusive cousin. So any sort of major event is going to be relevant to not only character, theme, etc. Yes. And moving on to our next element, characters. So I just mentioned a little bit, but let's dig deeper into that. So when we think about characterization, we want to focus on things like traits, motivations, actions. How are the characters acting in expected ways? But also, how are the characters acting in very unexpected ways? So I think a fantastic example of this is Molly Weasley, right? You might know Molly to be kind of frumpy, a homemaker, motherly, but then at the very end of the series, she kills Bellatrix, right? So we can argue that this is either very expected. She's a mama bear, right? She was defending her kid. Or on the flip side, we could say this is totally unexpected. Like, how did this woman have the dexterity to be able to do that? So there's never a right answer with any of this stuff. We can always play around with it depending how we look at it. Okay, talking about setting, right? So setting is going to be all about how our environment is influencing our mood, our tone, and themes. And with this, I also want to emphasize that even though setting tends to be a sort of stagnant geographic location, that doesn't mean its meaning is stagnant. In fact, its meaning can be extremely fluid, especially as we're moving throughout time. And I think a great example of this is Diagon Alley, right? So in the beginning, we have Harry's first visit to Diagon Alley, where it's portrayed as very wondrous, as very magical, kind of like a homey feel almost. But towards the end of the series, when the Death Eaters take over, then it's very desolate, it's empty, it's dark, and it's gray. So here we can see how that sort of social, political context is influencing how the reader and the audience is perceiving the setting. Okay, and symbols. So our symbols are going to consist of our hidden messages, our non-literal meanings, ideas, and actions. And so the most obvious symbol in Harry Potter is Harry's scar. And there are a lot of different meanings we can attribute to it. We can say it's a symbol of good versus evil. We can say it's a symbol of survival, a symbol of hope. Again, no right answer to it. It's all about how you approach it. And lastly, we want to talk about theme. So theme are going to be our recurring ideas and messages that are woven throughout the text. Again, we're not taking one little sentence out of it and saying, this is what the text means. Not at all. It's woven throughout and appears multiple times. And so Harry Potter is littered with themes, right? We could say it has a theme of found family. It has a theme of courage and bravery, of knowledge and wisdom. There's a whole lot that we can play with there. So the next thing we're going to walk through is applying theme and message to all the elements that we just talked about. So we're getting a little bit more specific in how we're approaching this. But before we go ahead and do that, I want to pose this question to you. So how do you think story elements impact the theme and message? And when you answer this, you can try using pieces that you've read for AP Lit. You can apply it to pieces you've read outside of AP Lit. So you can answer it however you feel is best fit. And I'm going to go ahead and give everyone a minute to respond to that in our chat. Molly was so mean to Hermione. Real, very real. Might be a hot take. I also wanted for handmade sweaters. I knit, but I am not that good. I wish I were. And if we're a little bit stuck, totally okay. We can think about, or we can walk through this together. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So the first thing we want to consider is our context, right? And we've already talked about this a little bit. So context is comprised of our historical, social, and cultural background. So in the context of Harry Potter, why were Harry's parents killed? Because of the Wizarding War, right? So that's the historical context right there. And because Harry's parents were killed, this is creating sort of a gap or a hole in Harry's relationships, in Harry's community, that later on, Ron, Hermione, Remus, Sirius, all are going to fill that. And so that's going to contribute to the theme of found family. And we can also take a look at characterization from the perspective of found family, right? So that core three, Ron, Hermione, Harry, you can kind of say that their traits all complement one another. We can say that Hermione is like the brains, Harry is the bronze in a sense, and Ron is the loyalty. So we can see how they complement one another, but you can also argue that they oftentimes butt heads. And we're going to take a look at conflict in a few minutes. But either way, we want to take a look at how those traits are interacting. Okay, and so setting comes back again. So how does setting play a role in the theme of found family? Well, we can say Hogwarts, right? Hogwarts are where Harry, Ron, and Hermione are spending the majority of their time. It's also where a majority of their adventures are taking place. So that's extremely pertinent to the theme. We can also say that the Burrow is extremely pertinent to the theme. It's where Harry, Ron, and Hermione are spending many of their breaks together. It's where they're really developing and building their friendships together. So there are a few answers for that one. And next we have symbols. So back to our hidden messages, our non-literal meanings. So for a symbol for found family, we could kind of say the Marauder's map, right? Made by Harry's dad, Sirius, Remus, as sort of a representation of the friendship that they had. And then later on, of course, Sirius and Remus would become a part of Harry's village, would become father figures for him. So that's one thing we could say symbolizes friendship in that instance. And lastly, I mentioned conflict, so let's dig a little deeper into it. Conflict can be how characters are not only interacting between themselves, but also how are they interacting with themselves, right? Their internal conflict, their cognitive dissonance, which may be creating tension. So in the context of Harry Potter, we can pick one example of when Ron dates Lavender, right? And Hermione is heartbroken over this. And so this conflict in particular is raising questions within their friend group. It's bringing romance into a previously platonic friendship, and they have no idea how to navigate that, which in turn creates that conflict. Okay, so I just threw a lot of information at you, And so now we're going to see what you know. So if you have another device, go ahead and scan this QR code to our very first Cram quiz. And I'm going to go ahead and give everyone about 2 minutes to sign on to that. If you have any issues accessing the Cram quiz, just send us a message in the chat and we will do our best to help you figure that out. But I'm going to go ahead and give everyone about 2 minutes to access the quiz. How many of us are Ravenclaws? I never really identified with a Ravenclaw. I'm going to be honest. I always call myself a Gryffindor, but I think that's a little biased. I don't know. Slytherin. I'm loving the answers in the chat right now. Thanks, Erica. I needed that validation. Okay, awesome. I'm going to give about 30 more seconds for everyone to join the quiz, and we can get started. Awesome, okay. I see 11 people have joined so far. I'm going to go ahead and give it just a few more seconds to get a bit more engagement. Again, if you're having any issues, just let us know in the chat and we will direct you from there. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of Dobby love in the chat. Dobby or Dobby? What do we prefer? I don't know. I say Dobby. Dobby. Okay, we have one vote for Dobby. Dobby. I think we're split. I think we're split. Awesome. Okay. We have 18 participants, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and get this quiz started. Okay. Awesome. I see the emojis you guys are showing. Awesome. Okay. Perfect. So let's go ahead and get those responses rolling in. I see a few people have already started to respond. Awesome. So again, just applying the ideas we just talked about to some new questions. And once we get to about most people having responded, I'll go ahead and reveal the answer. So our first question, what is typically symbolized by the use of springtime in literature? Okay, I'm seeing most people have responded. I'm going to give it 30 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and reveal. And yes, we got 100% on that one. That's fantastic, guys. So correct answer there, rebirth or new beginnings. Perfect. Of course, in springtime, we see all that growth. We see plants, we see flowers, everything that's associated with rebirth. So awesome job on that one, and let's keep going. So our second question, how does a setting during a period of war typically affect the development of characters in literature? Okay, let's go ahead and get the responses rolling in. Okay, about halfway there. A slither claw. Okay, I respect that. I respect that. Someone said, I'm a Hufflepuff or Slytherin. Those are complete opposites. What do you mean? I respect it. That's awesome, Libby. I'm very glad to hear that. Also, I do believe financial aid is offered for cram mode if that does pose a hardship to you. So if you aren't able to pay, please do look into that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give this about 10 more seconds and I'll reveal the answer. Okay, let's see. Okay, the majority of us did very good on this one. So let's go over it. So the correct answer is A. It often leads to characters experiencing growth through adversity. And I see some people chose D. It usually causes characters to remain static and unchanged. So what we're zoning in on here is that period of war, right? And we often associate war with things like PTSD, with trauma. So we wouldn't necessarily expect to see characters remain unchanged, but instead we would expect to see a whole bunch of change, specifically negative change, right? They're experiencing adversity. Some people may learn from this and grow, and other people may regress. So two different responses to it, but we would expect to see change and growth. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get the next question rolling. So, in evaluating the significance of historical context on The Great Gatsby, which element best illustrates the impact of the Roaring Twenties on the narrative's themes? So, it's okay if you haven't read The Great Gatsby, but think about what you associate with the Roaring Twenties to help you answer this one. What do we associate with the Roaring Twenties? Is it rural life, technological advancements, religion, the American dream? What do you think? Let's see. Thanks, Arnica. I see Arnica put the link to the financial aid in the chat. So again, if that poses a hardship to you, please do that. I never saw the movie, but I'll take your word for it. Although I'm a book purist for the most part, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. A musical? I did not know that existed. the Leo meme. Okay, everyone has answered. Perfect. Okay, so majority of people again got this one correct. So the correct answer for this one is C, the pervasive pursuit of the American dream. I see some people said the focus on technological advancements, right? But what we most associate with the Roaring Twenties is the American dream, right? Is the idea of wealth and of being able to attain that wealth and be able to live in a luxurious lifestyle. Technological advancements, not so much. We might expect that to see in a period written during the Industrial Revolution. That would be a little bit more fit for that. But remember, for these types of questions, we're looking for the best answer. But overall, great job, everyone. So let's go ahead and move on to the next question and our final question. So this one's a little bit more difficult, but it says, when a motif of light and darkness is prevalent in a literary work, which of the following best explains its potential significance in relation to the text's themes? Okay, so let's go ahead and get the responses rolling in for that one. Okay, doing well, doing well. A graphic novel? I did not hear of that. The music. Don't you love it? That and the Kahoot music. Bangers. Okay, we're almost there. Let's see if those last few participants can answer this one. Okay, try your best. If you're not sure, there are two approaches that I usually recommend you take. It's either elimination, right? So you start with what you definitely know isn't the answer, or in some cases, usually you're drawn to the correct answer, so you just go for it. So two approaches. If you're a little bit stuck on this one, try elimination. Jeopardy music. I agree. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reveal the answer in about 5 seconds. Get your responses locked in, and let's see. Okay, so again, a majority got this one right. So correct answer for this one is option A, the contrast between knowledge and ignorance. So if you weren't quite sure what a motif was, this might have made it a little bit difficult for you, which is totally okay. We will let you know what it is in our later sessions. But even if you didn't know, right, we can use the elimination method here. So I saw some people chose D, the presence or absence of literal illumination in various scenes. So remember, right, when we're talking about potential significance in relation to themes, themes are not necessarily going to be related to the literal, related to what's on the surface level. It's usually going to be about what's beneath the surface, right? What's not so obvious. So that's kind of how we can rule out option D. And that's how we also end up with option A, the contrast between knowledge and ignorance, in which is a typical symbol for light and darkness. But overall, awesome job on this quiz. Very proud. And so now we will go ahead and keep moving with our review session. I'm going to pass it on to my fellow student host, Rashi.
Hi, everyone. Let me introduce myself real quick. My name is Rashi. I am a sophomore at the University of Texas at Austin. And AP Lit was actually my favorite AP in high school. I took 2 weeks of AP Lang and did not like it, but I came back for AP Lit and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So today I'll be talking about narration and going into the perspectives and techniques. So narration is all about from whose point of view the story is told and the impact that it makes on the story. So let's get started. So the first part of narration is the point of view. The first version of point of view is first person, and this follows the protagonist or narrator's direct thoughts, and it'll use statements like I, we, and us. For example, I went swimming yesterday, or we went swimming yesterday. Fairly straightforward. The second category of point of view is second person, where the narrator describes the story utilizing you. Like, you went swimming yesterday with your friends. It's kind of like the narrator's giving you instructions in second person where they're telling you what to do. They're like telling you, you have to go swimming. And then lastly, there's third person. Third person is when the narrator is outside of the story and uses he, she, or they pronouns. For example, it could be, they went swimming yesterday with their friends. She accidentally stepped on a rock. And there's two categories within third person itself. The first one is limited, where the narrator only knows one person's thoughts or feelings. For example, Timmy felt very scared as he touched something wet and slimy with his foot. Or there's omniscient, where there's no bias to any characters, and the narrator has a full knowledge of the cast. And this would be, Timmy felt very scared as he touched something slimy with his foot. Meanwhile, Helen was giggling as she knew it was simply some gross gum she had thrown into the water earlier on before. So those are the three categories of point of view. And so here are some better examples. Oh my God, I actually completely came up with the Timmy one, but I see now he's referenced in the slide, so that's a little odd. The first person example is, I jumped in the pool and made a big splash. My friends laughed and joined in. So it's like I'm reciting my own thoughts, or the narrator is me. The second one, or second person, is, you're about to jump into a pool and make a big splash. You look nervously to your friend standing at the pool's edge. And in this case, it's like the narrator is giving you instructions. It's time for you to jump in, and you are going to look nervously at your friends. And then there's third person. So in third person limited, it would be, Timmy was scared to jump in the pool, but he faced his fears and made a big splash. Timmy's frightened. He's still going to go ahead, but we can only tell Timmy's thoughts. And then there's omniscient. Timmy was scared to jump in the pool, but his friends were excited to see his trick. In this case, you know both Timmy and his friends' point of views. So let's do a quick check for understanding. How can analyzing the perspective of a story provide insights into the author's purpose? So go ahead and drop some examples into the chat. Think about what the perspective of a story gives you access to that you wouldn't have otherwise. And then think about how that can relate to the author's purpose. And while we're waiting for a minute, so I see one answer in the chat. Stories where it creates drama is when you don't know what another character is thinking, it creates a lot of drama. It seems like there's a mystery going on. First person feels like it establishes trust because you now gain that intimacy associated with a character. These are both great answers. What I think of with point of view is the perspective tells you exactly what information the author thinks is relevant for the person to know. So you could have maybe the author only describing one character. It's told from the point first person. It tells you that character is the main character, and that the author wants you to be close to that character. But in third person omniscient, it's kind of like everyone here is a main character almost. Like there's not a particular character that the author is fixating on. And it also helps you become privy to the person's thoughts. You now know exactly what the character is trying to say or trying to think. It gives you a lot more insight into what the story, what is actually occurring in the story. Ooh, and I'm seeing some great answers in the chat. Nicely done. So let's move on. There's also distance in a story, and there's three types of distance. The first one is a physical distance between the narrator and events being described. So an example of this is explaining events in the same room versus in a different city. It'd be very different if I were saying, Timmy stared aghast as the murderer plunged the knife into his back. Or it could be, as Timmy stared aghast as the murderer plunged the knife into his back, Jenna was enjoying a nice martini in the Bahamas. Very different levels of distance. And it also gives you like a very different narrator feeling, in that the first one feels a lot more intimate about Timmy, and the second one is like kind of adding that sense of dramatic irony as well. The second example of distance is emotional, which is the emotional engagement that the narrator has with the characters or events. So the narrator can either be emotionally invested or detached. Emotionally invested would be something like, as Timmy felt the knife enter his chest, he thought about his wife and kids and the new dog or the puppy that's sitting in his car that he's waiting to take home, and started crying. Versus, as the knife plunged into Timmy, Timmy felt sad. Very different levels of description and very different feelings of engagement from the narrator. And lastly, the third type of distance is chronological, which is the distance of time between the narrator and events. So this would go into your past, present, future tensing. You would have Timmy died 17 years ago. The feeling that that gives us is very different from Timmy feels the knife plunge into his chest and starts sinking against the wall. Or you could also have Timmy is going to die tomorrow, which is a very alarming sentence as well. Yeah, poor Timmy. One of my best friends is named Timmy, so not entirely sure why he's getting hated on today, but that's up to him. And so another aspect of narration is style. So the first one, aspect is organization, as particularly talking about the stream of consciousness. The way the narrator talks to the audience or has their internal monologue reveals a lot of deeper character insights. But sometimes we also have this case of reliability, where the narrator might not be reliable. And this is when you need to identify the bias that the narrator is giving you. So we're going to look at this piece of prose, The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. I'm sure many of you guys have read it before, but we'll read it as a group and then analyze it a bit further. True, nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? So that is the entire, not the entire thing, but the first part. So now let's do a quick check for understanding. How does the stream of consciousness narration affect our understanding of a character's internal conflict? And I see a lot of you guys had posted answers after I'd started speaking, so I'll give a little longer for this one, but go ahead and drop your thoughts into the chat. I'm like scrolling through. I see someone said in the chat they own 4 different kinds of fake blood. I'm assuming you're like a theater kid. I don't know if that's like a rude judgment to make, but I feel like theater or someone involved a lot in costuming, question mark. Um, Someone said first person could also give like a sense of distrust because maybe they're questioning their sanity. Directly relates to the sense of reliability and having unreliable narrators. Can you really trust your narrator if they're talking from the first person because you only know the information they're giving you? Oh my God, a great thing for reliability, the Cask of Amontillado. Um, I think that is a very fun short story, except I've had to analyze it a few too many times at this point. So not kind of done with that, but very, very excellent piece of prose to analyze. Okay, so some of the thoughts I'm seeing in the chat. Stream of consciousness is a biased way of seeing the world. You only see the character's world through their emotions and constant thoughts. You know how the character knows, feels, and sees the problem from a different perspective. It gives a more intimate relationship with the character, and it can, if they seem to question themselves or have a strange reality perspection, it can really change up the reliability of the narrator. These are all exceptionally great answers, and all of them are correct. The stream of consciousness kind of tells you exactly what the character's internal conflict is about and also presents their point of view. And you can kind of tell what like the correct side is sometimes, but sometimes you can't. It's very different from like me saying, my sister stole my shirt all the time. I hate her. And that could be the entire internal monologue, but it could also be, my sister stole her shirt, but it's okay because the other day I sold her hamster on the black market, so I've gotten my revenge. Very different levels of escalation, but it kind of tells you exactly what that character's mental stream of consciousness level is at. Next slide, please. So, looking particularly at the telltale heart, we're going to analyze these 2 questions. And the first one is, how is the author conveying their message? And the second question is, how can analyzing the perspective from which a story is told provide insights into authorial intent? So go ahead and drop into the chat what you guys think. And look particularly at this piece of prose and see what particular words, the organization, the stream of consciousness, what does it tell you about the character and about the author's message? And I see a wonderful message in the chat. So the stream of consciousness details the tangential thought process of a character. The intentionally discombobulated structure details the character's possible stress in a realistic way, depicting their emotions in a realistically unorganized way. Excellent response. That is definitely very applicable here. The sentence structure here, I see Kasia, I'm not, might have messed up that pronunciation, please correct me in the chat, pointed out that the sentence structure and the punctuation here definitely adds to the way the author's conveying their message. Lots of dashes, lots of sentences being broken. The author is constantly repeating things to himself, very, very dreadfully. Above all was the sense of hearing. I heard things in heaven, in the earth, I heard things in hell. Lots of long strings of sentence fragments. These are all great ways the author is conveying their message. For me, I think the thing that particularly stands out is the diction here. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. Okay, I see Katya. Sorry. But nicely done for your answer. But I think that the diction of hearing all those things adds to the sense that they're insane because that's not what a normal person would say. Normal person would say, I heard the things around me. But the emphasis here on hearing everything adds to the sense of insanity. And you can also see that the character is questioning themselves, almost like, why are you saying that I'm mad? Like they're asking for validation that they aren't insane here. Also, the sense of first person is, or sorry, the use of first person is wonderfully done here because it gives you the direct insight into this character. It'd be very different if the narrator was a third person and was saying, I saw the man muttering to themselves. They might be insane, they just might be stressed out. But that first person ends up giving that direct insight into their stream of consciousness. All right, I think it's time to move on. Let's get started onto our second practice quiz. So you can go ahead and scan the QR code to access it. And I will also get it up on the little green button on the bottom. Sorry, give me 1 second. Me when I don't know how to type and I keep on hitting tab instead of anything else. My laptop is now 5 years old, and I've replaced her battery once, but right now she's huffing and puffing away, and I'm a little concerned actually for her. Link is in the chat, and we'll also be showing the quiz on. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start the quiz, but the link is in the chat and it's also up on the screen if you want to join midway through. Super sorry, it seems like the quiz is taking a second to load, but that's just how it is sometimes. I know the music was I was a particular fan of the music. I was gonna say the music was a fan of me. I was a really big fan of the music last year. People would call it the samosa song because it sounds like he's saying samosa in the back. But we have a third quiz planned later. So actually, we can go back to the slides, I think. And that third quiz will cover some of the content we did here. And I am now going to pass it off to my amazing host, Zoe, who's going to talk about plot structure.
Hi guys, my name is Zoe, and today we're going to be talking about story structure interpretation. Well, before that, let me introduce myself. As it's in the chat earlier, I'm a freshman at Tufts University, right outside of Boston, but I'm originally from New York. But more focusing on AP Lit. Today we're going to be talking about story structure and interpretation. So, mainly, this is basically how an author decides to structure their story. What does it mean? Why do they do that? And how does it impact how the story can be interpreted? So, moving on, can we go to the next slide? Perfect. What is story structure? So, I mean, that's kind of a big blanketed term, but breaking it down into three different parts that impact how the story can be interpreted and how you can understand a story. First, there's the elements of structure. So, the basic organization of a story. We're looking at the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, the resolution. So, we're going to get more into that in the next slide, but it looks kind of like a hill. And it's basically the components of a linear story, the beginning, the middle, and the end. The next part would be the narrative techniques. So this is tools that authors use to convey a story. So the point of view, foreshadowing, flashback, and symbolism, and how these different techniques can impact how you can interpret a story. The real question here is, why did the author decide to do that? And then that third part is plot development, which is how the author decides to unfold the story, how quickly, and how they decide to build out the story. And what does this mean? How does this impact the text? So looking at the next slide, the real question is, how does structure influence a narrative? You can drop in the chat what you think the answer is. We're really going to break it down. So if anyone has any ideas of how structure can impact a narrative and how you can understand what the author is trying to say. Give you guys a couple minutes to drop that in there. I see we're confusing samosa with mimosa. Honestly, real. Aren't those the names of like the little Girl Scout cookies? I could be lying. I have actually no idea what a samosa is. We're going to move on to what the elements of a structure are, because I get a little confused too. So the first part would be exposition. Oh, we have some answers in the chat. Thank you, Arnica. It is a Samoa. Oh, wait, it's a Samoa. Darn it. I was really confident it was the same thing. Okay. Structure does influence how the audience perceives the narrative. Yes. So we're going to look at that and basically break down how structures are made together. Thanks, guys. Thanks for making me feel better about not knowing what a samosa is. So, exposition. This is the beginning, where you introduce the setting, the characters, the initial conflict. So, let's use that guy Timmy again, because we liked him in before. So, in a story, you'd be introduced to Timmy. You know where Timmy lives, what Timmy does, stuff like that. The next part would be rising action. So think of it like a hill. We're already starting at the basis of the hill, where we just got to know Timmy. Now we're working our way up the hill. If we can click again, we'll see rising action. Rising actions, when the conflict starts to increase, we're seeing a little bit more tension, and we're starting to hit the top of the hill again. This is maybe when we're learning about Timmy's friends and getting to know Timmy a little bit more. We're hiding the suspense. We're creating... No, you're good. We're getting toward that climax. Things aren't really that interesting yet because you're still going up the hill, but the climax is the top of the hill. Now, I don't know if you guys saw that thing in like kindergarten where like do the little hill thing, but that's what I think of every time I see it. And this is where things start to get messy. This is where things start to get interesting. It's a turning point. The conflict reaches its peak, and it provides a pivotal moment in the story where the narrative is going to start getting toward the end. So, Timmy's friend slaps him across the face. That's the climax of the story. Something crazy happened. Moving on, he's trying to figure out what to do with this. I know, poor Timmy. What is Timmy going to do? He just got slapped across the face. The falling action is how Timmy's going to deal with this climax. We got to hit toward a resolution here. There has to be some... Timmy needs revenge. Timmy needs to have a solution. So the falling actions, maybe Timmy asking his friend what happened. Maybe there's a little... You're coming back down that hill, right? It sets the stage for a resolution. And then finally we hit that resolution. I'm going to agree with you, Libby. Timmy is going to sue. And Timmy wins. That is the resolution. It brings closure to the narrative and reveals the fate of the characters. So just think about the little hill that we went on. We met Timmy. There's a little bit of rising tension. Maybe him and his friends were arguing. Timmy got slapped across the face. That's the climax. Timmy starts getting a little mad. He starts fighting with his friend. And then he decides to sue him. and then he wins. That's the resolution. So that's how structure influences a narrative. So do you guys know any parts that made a story memorable? Like, how does its techniques... Oh, you're so good. Don't worry about it. So what elements of a structure made the story memorable? Was it the beginning? Was it the middle? And when you're reading a text, that's what you have to remember it. Well, this Timmy, we're going to keep it PG. He didn't get stabbed. But yes, in Stranger Things, yes, he did. So looking at the next part, narrative techniques. So how do sudden techniques such as sudden exposition, foreshadowing, and flashbacks impact a narrative? So these are a lot of different terms I'm throwing at you. So first, there's 3 different ways that they kind of impact a narrative before we define these terms. We have emotion. Evoking emotion through tension or suspense. Then there's complexity, which is just looking at how deep and what are the motivations behind different characters. What did the author want them to do and why did they want them to do it? And then interpretation. Influence on the overall understanding of the novel. This is looking at why the author did these things. The whole point of story structure is looking at why the author decided to make their story look this way. Why did they make this emotion? Why did they make it so complex? What is the interpretation? What does this impact the story? So looking at the next slide, we're going to break down those different types of narrative techniques. First, we have sudden exposition. So this just means when the story starts abruptly. So imagine if the story started when Timmy got slapped in the face. We didn't start from building up the character. We started at the climax. Why does the author do this? What impact does this have? What would be the benefit of this? This would just be to establish a sense of urgency or tension from the outburst. Foreshadowing would be if the author decided to talk about how Timmy's friend is violent. He likes to slap people for fun. The author would be building that suspense and anticipation around the idea that Timmy might get slapped in the end. The next part would be flashbacks. Maybe you flash back to a past event where Timmy had gotten slapped before a week before. This would be a flashback. The author is using that to provide backstory and character depth for you to understand the story on a deeper level. Then we have in medias res, which is a little bit different than sudden exposition. Sudden exposition creates a sense of urgency. It's kind of when you're thrown in the middle, but it's creating a tense environment. In medias res would be starting right in the middle of the action. The first line in the paper would be, and Timmy got slapped across the face. That's right in the middle of the action. Sudden exposition is more of just creating an urgency, and this just makes it seem a little bit more intriguing and makes you more curious about what's happening in the story. I mean, you have no backstory and you just know about Timmy getting slapped. That would make me interested. What did Timmy do? Did Timmy deserve it? Was his friend just really mean? We don't know. A circular narrative is a little bit weirder. This is one which really truly like a circle, where it ends the story where it began. Everything just going around in circles. And that really made me confused the first couple times I saw it, but it really emphasizes the themes of repetition or closure. You start exactly where you ended. Timmy was on his way home. That's how the story started, with his best friend. And that's how the story ended again. They resolved their issues, and he walked home. Like that, it's the same idea, it's the same scene, and it just shows a sense of theme of repetition or closure in the story. So I just want to take a minute, if anyone has any questions about how techniques such as sudden exposition or foreshadowing can impact a narrative. If you know a specific book or something that you remember that really impacted the book when they did a couple flashbacks or something like that, drop them in the chat. If I had to pick one, it'd be like The Great Gatsby, because the flashbacks are amazing in The Great Gatsby. It really makes you like, wow, Gatsby was crazy. So if you can go to the next slide, well, you guys can drop whatever you think of in the chat. So plot development. How does pacing and tension in narratives impact the way that a story develops? So basically, if an author decides that they want to build suspense, or if they want to make time go slower or faster, how does that impact the story? So I see a question in the chat. Is there a good way of telling the difference between sudden techniques and medias res? Do you have any good ideas or examples from fiction? I'm going to let the people in the chat answer that question just because we're running a little low on time. But there are certainly a bunch of great books. I think the other student hosts will be really helpful with that. So building suspense, this is when we've talked about this, heightening the stakes, making it a little bit more interesting. I mean, no one wants a flat story. I don't want to hear about Timmy's walk to school and nothing happened. You want there to be drama. Everyone enjoyed when Timmy got slapped because it's enjoying. Drama is fun. So you want to build suspense to make the book more interesting or the story more interesting. Sometimes an author will manipulate and kind of tell a story out of place with those flashbacks and foreshadowing to help you understand the story better. And the last part is reader engagement. So, at the speed in which readers read, how does that influence the involvement and the emotional investment in the narrative? What impact do all three of these things have on the reader and how they understand the story? That's the big part of story structure. How does the structure of a story impact how the reader will understand it, how they interpret the message, and relate to the characters? So I'm going to move it back onto Rashi. Nice seeing you guys.
Okay, and we're going to end the night talking about theme and message. So this is what the author is kind of leading you with, or kind of like the whole point of writing their story. We're just going to do a quick skim really quickly of the points so that we end on time. So there are three main questions when analyzing theme and message. First one, why is theme important? Second one, how do you recognize theme and message? And lastly, what are some common themes? So theme is important because themes reveal the deeper layers of a story and provide insight to the author's perspective and purpose. Maybe in the case of Timmy, the theme was actually that Timmy was a corrupt police cop and now he's getting slapped as for justice for his crimes. The theme there, corruption, good versus evil. How can you recognize theme? Authors use narrative devices and patterns to convey theme. So these will be things like recurring motives, symbols, conflicts, narrative arcs, etc. And some common themes: love, identity, good versus evil, coming of age, survival, justice, corruption, nature, death, freedom, etc. Basically, any like vague idea that kind of like has a deeper meaning, I feel, could end up being a theme. Very vague statement, but I'm sure you get what I mean. Just note that theme statements have to be a full sentence. You can't just say, the theme is love and refuse to elaborate. And we'll skip over the quiz for the sake of time. So I know we have, 2 minutes left, but if you have any final questions, now's the time to ask them. Drop them in the Q&A or drop them in the chat really quickly. People are going through and answering. The 3-hour sessions are available to people who have Cram mode. But the next preview on the 30th is free for everyone. Please come and join us. We're going to be talking about poetry, and it'll be an amazing analysis. What do I think are common mistakes in prose questions? I would say definitely not reading the question properly. The biggest tip I have is to go slow and make sure you're understanding exactly what the question is asking you to do, and also understand what like specific literary device or function or argument it wants you to answer. Make sure whatever your answer is, it connects back to that. Crafting a literary argument, we'll be going over that full detail during Cram mode itself. And while you're here, click that green button on the bottom that says survey. It'll take you to an amazing survey, which will help us improve our content so that the next few crams are even better. And let's go ahead and wrap up now. Thank you all so much for joining. It was amazing to have you. And we can't wait to see you guys in the next few weeks. Bye, everyone.